Hello my friends, and welcome to my channel. My name is Severiano Paoli, and today we're gonna talk about the double bass. Today's episode, as you could guess from the title, is about buying a bow. It is needless to say how fundamental the bow is in order to play the double bass. It is the piece of gear that connects our ideas, our expressivity, to the string. We could say that the bow is our voice, in fact. As you can imagine, when something is so relevant to our playing, it is really important to buy consciously a tool that will allow us to play at the best. So, let's go deeper into it. Before we get started, I'd like to point out for whom this video is meant. I have thought this episode for the advanced students and young professionals who decide to purchase the first professional bow, as much as for the established musicians, for musicians which are already professionals, who still wish to add a new bow to their collection and would like just to, to be more aware about how to get a proper one. This video is not meant for younger students, for beginners, for two reasons fundamentally. The first one, most students, most beginners or intermediate students won't have the money to purchase an object like a professional bow. These are expensive things. I know, I've been there. And also, the second reason, which is the most important, a beginner, a young student, won't, young I mean young in development, not necessarily the age. Anyway, a young student won't be aware yet of what he actually needs from a tool like this. So the risk is that he might end up spending a lot of money in an object that eventually does not suit him. So this video is meant for who already has this sort of awareness. Now that we did this introduction, let's get to it. How do I buy a bow? One last thing before I forget. All the examples in these videos and all the criteria I show you will be mostly about modern bows. And you're gonna see German bows because that's what I use, so bows with an underhand grip. As a matter of fact, most if not all the criteria also apply to French bows, so overhand grip, and to a certain extent to historical bows, but that's a topic we're gonna go about another time. So, the day has come. You've put your money together and you go out and want to buy your first, maybe, or anyway, a new professional bow to boost your career, to boost your playing. Fantastic, that's beautiful. I know the excitement, I've been there, I keep buying bows. If you look, there's a shelf here, it's full of them. I love bows, So I really know how you're feeling. And I also know that you're most likely worried because you have a considerable amount of money in your hands and you don't want to throw it away. Here's where I come in. So, let's take a look at how you should think when buying a bow. There are two sorts of criteria you have to consider when you decide to buy a bow. Or everything, I guess. One sort is the objective criteria, which regard the wood, the quality of the wood, the quality of the construction and the price and such, and of course the subjective criteria, which have to do with how the bow feels in your hands. Let's take a look at both of them. When talking about the objective criteria, I'd like to start from the end, which is the price of the bow. A double bass bow, a professional double bass bow, is not a cheap object, and I can tell you from my own experience of buying bows, of selling bows, and of going to expositions and being in this world, a professional bass bow cannot cost less than 1500 euros. And you'll tell me, well, that's quite a lot of money. Why? I'll tell you. First of all, the pernambuco, which is the wood with which most of the sticks are made, is very expensive. Has always been expensive as a wood. It's a wood that comes from Brazil with very specific characteristics. Also, high quality pernambuco has become extremely rare nowadays. Simply because the good one has been cut down and trees need to grow up, but it takes decades, if not centuries. So, as you can imagine, when the availability of a product goes down, prices go up. Also, the materials that constitute the frog, the bottom, this is bone, for example, this is ebony, although it's not so much, but they're still relatively expensive materials, ebony especially. Also, I would like you to think of this. You see a very thin stick, a thin frog, but this before was such a plank of wood. It was a chunk like this, which has been worked, which has been carved and shaped by the bow maker. So it's actually quite a lot of wood that goes away when building a bow. Keeping in mind that when you buy a plank of wood, I mean, you feel if it's good or not, but you're not inside of it. So you might even have to throw it away after the first cut because maybe something inside went bad. So you don't even have that certainty. There are also other parts, of course, like the screw, like the silver, the hair. Of course, their price is not as high as the one of the stick, but still, all together, they constitute quite a consistent amount of money that is needed in order to just have the materials to build something like this. Of course, next to the cost of the material, we have to consider the obvious cost of work, of the craftsmanship, because the bow maker or the bow makers that will work around your bow need to spend hours, need to spend energy, and of course need to acquire a certain knowledge beforehand in order to be able to craft something so fine. Which means that, of course, and then of course there are taxes. So if you think about all that I've told you so far, the 1500 euros minimum don't sound anymore so crazy, because there's a lot on the plate. There's the undubious cost of the materials, and of course all the craftsmanship and knowledge and work hours of the maker. In this sense, I would like to propose you a reflection. Often you find bows that are obviously underpriced, that maybe, I mean, they look well crafted and maybe are even, but the price is extremely competitive up to a point that it's a bit fishy. Well, I'm never completely convinced by these bows. I've never bought one, and I'll tell you why. Well, first of all, the cost of workforce is not the same in every country. I mean, a craftsman here in the Netherlands, where I live, earns a lot more, of course, than a craftsman in I don't know, in the Czech Republic or in Romania or in China, where we'll probably earn much less. And okay, so it does make sense that a bow coming from, for example, an Eastern land that is less developed, or anyway where the cost of work is lower and the cost lower, yet the materials, the Pernambuco especially, comes all from the same place, comes from Brazil. So the price of the sheer chunk of wood is the same for everyone. Now, I don't want to get into other people's business, and I'm sure that bow makers have their own deals with resellers, but I can't believe that good quality wood can cost so much less because of a good deal, because it costs money at the origin. Which means that in cheaper budget bows, you may find a lower quality of Pernambuco. Notice, I'm talking about Pernambuco, I'm talking about professional bows, because there are student bows that are much cheaper, made with cheaper woods, but that's clear, that's shown to, I mean, that's declared, so you know what you're buying. I'm talking about Pernambuco. So, as I was saying, the quality of the Pernambuco will be most likely lower in a bow that costs much less. And there's nothing bad with it as long as you let the buyer know. Unfortunately, this doesn't happen every time. Also, sometimes with very low prices, you risk to buy bows made out of wood that has not been harvested responsibly, so it does not fulfill the criteria of sustainability, of fair trade and such, that are really relevant nowadays, that should be very relevant anytime. So you might get wood that has been harvested in shady, if not illegal circumstances, with maybe exploitation of the worker, exploitation of forests that should not be exploited and stuff like that. Everybody is free to buy whatever he wants, but I would like you to reflect about what you're buying, to buy responsibly, for yourself and for the planet's sake, if anything. Talking about construction, there are some really important things to check out when buying a bow. A very important one is the straightness of the stick. This is something you can check very easily. You take the bow with the hair detention, you look at the tip and you look all through it, and you see that the stick is straight. Why did I say when the bow is detensioned? Because when you start giving some tension to the hair, some things might change. It may happen that the stick will tend to bend slightly this way, so if you're playing like this, towards the string. If that happens, it's not bad. Actually, some bow makers give that sort of curve deliberately, willingly, and I don't know what exactly happens, but they say that it gives more, that it gives a better grip to the string. In any case, that's not something negative. It may even be positive, and it does not, let's say, hinder your playing or make the bow weaker. Of course, if the stick starts pointing the other way, so towards the ground, then no, then don't. Then that bow has a problem. And of course, it's important that the bow might bend laterally but stay straight, that the bow is not crooked, so that it doesn't start to, screw it on himself, because that would be a bow that is where the wood is weak, and that won't play properly. So that's a very important characteristic. Something that is also very important, and that you feel right away, especially the frog, is that there are no, let's say, rough edges or sharp edges or anything that could make your playing experience be worse. I mean, for example, I once tried a bow that was actually not bad at all, but this part of the frog was sharp. I mean, after playing 10 minutes, I started having a wound on my finger. These are all things that can be fixed, but when you go to buy, you want an object that is good, that is perfect, and I believe that bow makers should really care about these things. Another thing to check is whether the wood has knots or cracks. Now, of course, if it has cracks, don't buy it because it's broken. If there is a knot, that's not necessarily bad. I mean, some pieces of wood have more knots. This bow, this is an excellent bow, I'm really happy about it, has a little knot here. I've been playing with this bow for, now what, 6-7 years, and in very rough conditions, and never gave a problem. I mean, knots in general make the wood weaker, but then you have to see. Anyway, it's always good to check out, and in case to evaluate with the luthier or with someone, the expert, how much, whether or not that knot will influence the stability of the stick. Now that we've seen the objective criteria in bows, it's time to take a look at the subjective ones. And the first question I would ask myself when buying a new bow is, what am I going to use this bow for? Am I going to use it for solo music, for chamber music, for orchestra? Am I going to play on gut strings, on steel strings? This is something very important to keep in mind when buying an object like this, because of course it's always nice when a bow allows you to do as many things as possible, and a professional bow will be good at everything, but every bow will have a field at which it works at its best. Some solos are more solistic, some bows are more orchestral. This bow, for example, I have in my hands, this is an amazing bow on gut for orchestra playing. It's also a pretty good bow at for solo on steel, and that's what I use it for. I bought it also looking for these characteristics. So knowing what you're going to use it for is a very important point to have in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is what your playing style is. For example, you could have a heavy hand, so you kind of push on the string, you have pretty authoritative approach, or perhaps you're a lighter player that plays in a more relaxed way. Well, most likely the bow that fits the first won't fit the second, and the other way around, because they're different approaches. They're both good, it's just about finding the right tool. Also, something to keep in mind is how long do you want this bow to be? Do you want it to be on the short side, average, like this for example, longer? I've seen bows like this. Do you like a lighter bow? That also has to do with your approach, of course. If you have a heavy hand, probably a lighter bow will do better for you, and the other way around. Or do you want a heavy bow? And look, the weight of bass bows can really vary a lot. We go from little more than 100, 110 up to 300 and more. So knowing what you like, what you feel like in general, will already put you in a good direction. And why do I say this? Why do would I put you? I mean, why do I suggest you to think about this beforehand? Because when you go to a shop or to a bow reseller, you will find yourself often in a sea of bows. You'll have maybe 20 different bows to try. So, I mean, of course, it's good to try them more, and that's what I would do anyway. But it's also good. It's also good to have an idea of what you actually need, not to get confused. Because I can tell you, after trying many bows one after the other, you can't really understand anymore what you're doing, what you're feeling, you know. So it's good to already have relatively clear ideas. One thing that is fundamental when you buy a bow, many people overlook that, but I think you really must look at it. The frog, the size and shape of the frog. A bow needs to be like a chisel, needs to be something that fits in your hand, that is an extension of your arm and of your hand. The frog needs to sit perfectly in your hand. Especially when buying a new bow from a luthier that is alive, that is in front of you. You can really be picky and go for the right frog. Keeping in mind, you can always change a frog on a bow, that's not a problem. But it's always very good if the frog fits well in your hand. For example, if you look at my hand, this frog, I don't know how good you can see it, but just fits perfectly. When I play with this bow, I feel extremely comfortable. I just can play for hours. I don't feel tired, and that's important. For example, I personally don't like small frogs, smaller than these, because I start to get cramps. I personally like large frogs. I even have on my historical bows, I have much larger frogs, so there wouldn't be a problem. But I find that this size is actually what suits my hand the most. So when you go and treble, this of course applies to the French bow as well. Anyway, when you always keep your hand in account when you go to choose a bow, always think that the bow needs to fit well in your hand. Something really important, that would be very important, you can't unfortunately do it all the time, especially if you go abroad to check a bow, but if you can do it, bring your bass with you and try it on your instrument, because that's the instrument you will play most of the time. It's true that you should be able to use the same bow on as many instruments as possible, but in practice you will most of the time play on yours, and also yours as the setup you like, and the kind of strings and such. So I would suggest to have your instrument with you to try the bow on. They will give you a more objective and a clearer idea of how the bow works. When I get a bow and it's the first time I have it in my hand, there are three things I try. I take a bass. I'm not gonna play now because it's actually quite late in the evening and I don't want my neighbors to start a riot against me. But you can have an idea what I'm doing. So I try three things. First of all, I try some long notes, even open strings, just to see how the leading of the bow goes, how good I feel with it. Then I try to play some short phrases, like pieces I know. This seems like something stupid I'm going to say, but practice, try both on stuff you can actually play properly. Why? Because otherwise your brain will concentrate on actually playing, for example, in tune, playing properly, but a passage you don't know so well. If you play a passage that you know well, then you don't have to concentrate on it and you can be more realistic about the judgment of the bow. So for example, I could play a small excerpt from a concerto or whatever I have in my mind. After that, I try an orchestral passage with some spiccato in it. Why? Because if I manage to have a good sound, a good control in long notes, and I manage to have a good spiccato, I pretty much have everything that I need from the bow. So these are the three things I try, and generally it doesn't take me so long to do this tryout. In half an hour I can judge a bow because you both don't need to warm up. You see right away what they can and what they cannot do. And this brings me to another important point, maybe the most important. Choosing a bow is falling in love. You don't have to think so much. If you take it in your hand and wow, you have this reaction, then you might buy it. If you have less than this, maybe you should look also at other stuff. Because again, the bow is an extension of your body. It needs to be your voice. It needs to be something that feels good at a very how to say basic level. It needs to feel good with your body. It's a bodily thing. You can't really rationalize it. It just has to feel good. For example, this bow, when I took it, I just did boom. Wow, I loved it, and then I kept it some days and eventually decided to buy it. But on the first note I played, there was no doubt. Of course, then you take some time to try it out. You might find out maybe that there's something you don't like. But generally, your guts tell the truth. Let's now imagine that you've gone to a shop, to a luthier, and you found a bow that you really like. You feel good, it sounds good, you want to buy it. Yet there's something that does not convince you. For example, maybe the frog is a little bit too high for you and your hand doesn't feel good. Or you feel that it's maybe a bit heavy on the tip and you would like more weight behind. Or it has a bit too much curve, but it's a bow that you like and maybe you're not gonna buy it because of that. Wait, bows are not made out of stone. So there are some things that can be easily modified by bow makers. So just take a look at some of them. You can always change a bit the shape of the frog. Of course, you can't make it larger, but you can make it, for example, thinner, or change a bit the edges, like for example, polish them, make them sharper. Why would you? Or make them, I don't get the word, but you know what I mean, make them, get them more slope. You can change the frog also. That's always an option. That does not. I mean, everything you change will change the bow a little bit, but that it won't be so tragic. If you don't like the balance completely, for example, and you feel, for example, you want more weight to the frog, you can, for example, this bow doesn't need it, but you can always put, for example, some leather. Let me show you. Some leather. Some silver wire in case, add some grams in order to give it some more weight towards the frog. You can put a heavier button, or in the worst cases you can always for example scrap some wood away from the tip. We're talking about maybe half gram, a gram. That makes a big difference. The curve of the bow, you can always change it. It actually happened with this bow. When I bought it at the beginning, the bow was like this, really, at a very, very, very pronounced concave curve. This did not match with my style of playing. I like a bow that is a little bit more jumpy, let's say. So I asked Paola Brancato, she's the maker of this bow, to reduce the curve. So I sent it back to the shop and she removed a bit of curve. I got it back. Amazing, like fantastic. It's really what I wanted. I don't feel any change in the playability. I feel only improvements. The bow doesn't feel different. It actually feels just better. And the hair itself, I mean, needless to say, can be changed. For example, this is an excellent white hair, Siberian hair, but some people prefer, for example, coarser hair like black hair or brown, red hair. There are so many. There are so many things that you can change in order to personalize your bow to make it the best for your needs. Which means, before turning a bow down, always think about what could be changed in order to make it suit you better. Your bow maker, luthier, will be for sure happy and won't have any problem in doing it, especially if it's the luthier who built the bow. Two things are the most personal in this world: your toothbrush and your bow. You would never lend your toothbrush to somebody or borrow from somebody else and use it, I hope. Well, I'm not saying you can't do this with the bow. Of course, you can give your bow to a colleague or borrow a bow from somebody and that. But if you buy an object like this, you buy it to fit your specific needs. And it will be very personal, although it can happen, but it's much likely that other players won't feel with it as comfortable as you do. Exactly because you bought it for yourself, for your own needs. Why am I saying this? I mean, this might seem obvious. Well, put yourself in the shoes of a student that is at the point to willing to buy his first bow, and of course he's still inexpert about it. He never did it, and gets, for example, his teacher that tells him, yeah, you know, these bows I use work very well, I'm so happy. And I'm not saying that he says that because he wants to have an advantage from maybe he has a deal with the bow maker. No, I'm not saying it because of that. I'm saying it because I'm sure that this teacher likes it, likes the bow, yes. But this bow works well in the teacher's hand, so not necessarily in the student's hand. Same thing, another student, maybe older, could go and say, hey, look, yeah, my bow works well, you should check this bow maker out and see what he makes. Perfect in both cases. You should definitely go and check the bow maker that your teacher and your fellow students suggest you, because of course they do it for you to help you find the object you need. But always remember, you have to buy something that works for you only, because it's you that will have to play with it. I have heard and I've seen it once with my eyes, students that bought copies of their teacher's bow. Well, I've always been a bit perplexed by that, because yeah, I mean, I believe they're good bows, and these teachers I'm telling you about are excellent players that do great things with this bow. Yet I would not blindly buy a copy of somebody else's bow. I would never do it, because everyone is made different, as a different way. There are so many variables. So, long story short, try as many bows as possible, ask for suggestions, receive suggestions, but in the end, never forget, it needs to fit you and you only. So my friends, that's it for today. I'm really happy to have done this video. I hope it is helpful for who wishes to buy a new bow. And if you have any questions, any comments, critics, please write them in the comment section here below. Thank you so much for following. I noticed that there are more people following this channel. I am really thankful about this, and this gratifies me a lot and makes me even happier to make these videos for you. Feel free to write me in the comments if you're interested. If there's a topic you'd like me to talk about, and I will plan it for the next videos. This said, I wish you all the best and see you soon in the next video. Ciao!